Welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I'm Peter Gross, co-host of the original Wild Kingdom with Marlin Perkins and Jim Fowler. When Wild Kingdom aired in the 1960s and 70s, many episodes documented wildlife research efforts. Marlin and Jim accompanied scientists all over the world to observe animals and their natural behaviors. Some of the techniques you'll see in tonight's episodes are no longer necessary by today's standards, but the work is still just as important. Wild Kingdom took viewers to the far corners of the world and cultivated an appreciation for animals and their habitats. Marlin and Jim showed us the importance of preserving the natural world, not just for animals, but for our quality of life. And that's good news for all of us in the Wild Kingdom. So sit back and enjoy Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom right here on RFD-TV.
Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom is presented by Mutual of Omaha, people you can count on.
Welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Over the years, I've studied many animals in the wild, and I've learned that successful observation is largely a matter of being in the right place at the right time. The best place I know of for observing bird life is in the northern part of India. There's an area of lowland here where a forest is located, the Forest of Bharatpur. And the best time to see birds in this forest is after the heavy monsoon rains have fallen. Because during the monsoon, the heavy rains and overflowing rivers flood the forest floor, creating a wide, shallow lake. This lake, then, attracts millions of birds. Many of them come to Bharatpur to nest and raise their young. And one of the most colorful of these is the painted stork. The nests of these large birds seem to fill the treetops. I visited this unusual forest at the invitation of the Indian government and the renowned ornithologist Dr. Philip Call, who was doing research there. Starting from New Delhi, I traveled 100 miles south to see the birds of Bharatpur. Monsoon rains have flooded the lowland forests of Bharatpur now, and water birds of many kinds have gathered here for the nesting season. They've built their nests in the tops of the partially submerged acacia trees, and we can approach them quite easily as we glide through the sanctuary's shallow water. It isn't unusual to see 4 or 5 species sharing the same tree, but it looks like this part of the lake has been claimed mainly by painted storks. These large birds gather here by the thousands, so this is an ideal place for the stork research studies of ornithologist Dr. Philip Call. He's spent several seasons observing these treetop nests at Bharatpur, and in all the world, I don't know of a better place for bird watching. Flying just ahead, a painted stork. That platform nest isn't far from us, and we won't approach much closer. In nesting season, our presence nearby could make the birds nervous. Painted storks get their name from that brilliant plumage, and during this time of courtship and nesting, the pink, white, and black feathers become even brighter, while the color of the head and legs deepens. They're among the most colorful birds in the sanctuary. On those long legs, they stand about 3.5 feet tall. And with that long reach, you can scratch an itch no matter where you are. It's approaching midday, and in the intense heat, many of the storks have taken to the water for a cooling bath. But newborn chicks can't do this. So you often see storks gathering wet vegetation during the hottest part of the day to cool the unshaded nests. It's time now for our guide Hookem Singh to move our boat nearer to the thick groves of trees, where there are many nesting storks. Phil has established an observation post in the water just ahead. It's a small blind called a mashan, and it's positioned very close to some trees with an unusually large number of nests. If we remained this near in the boat, the birds would soon become uneasy, and they wouldn't behave in a normal manner. But once Phil is hidden from view inside the blind, he'll be able to observe the nest at very close range without disturbing the birds. Now, as soon as we leave the area, the storks should settle back into their usual routine.
From the blind, I have a clear view of the nests in the trees directly ahead. The storks here are accustomed to the blind and don't really notice whether it's occupied or not. It's an ideal place to observe their behavior. This time of day, many adults are off the nest feeding, and it looks like some of them are starting to return. These storks are as graceful in flight as any bird I've seen, as handsome in the air as they are on land. Many of the birds range far for food every day, and one of the main objects of my study is to observe how the chicks in these nests are fed. There's another stork, returning to a nest very close to the blind. Immediately, the chick goes into a begging routine, wagging its head from side to side, urging the parent to regurgitate its freshly caught fish. Generally, the adult waits a while before doing so, possibly to partially digest the fish for the youngster. Normally, the parent drops the fish onto the floor of the nest, but it looks like this one may have come back empty-handed. There are many chicks here this size, but you'll also see many nests with eggs, as the egg-laying season continues for several months. Usually 3 or 4 eggs are laid, and while the natural mortality rate will claim some, you see many nests crowded with chicks. These are excellent parents, and these chicks are getting a welcome drink of water. You often see the birds sunning themselves. This stork is in a classic sunning posture, the delta position, and its chicks are taking advantage of the shade. While the sun is high, the storks will often shade the nests by extending their wings fully to shelter a larger brood. The day-to-day observations from this single blind, the notes of feeding times and other data can tell us a great deal about these storks. They're fascinating birds, and I don't know a better place to observe them than in the treetop nests of Bharatpur.
In the boat, I moved into a new area of the sanctuary. We had seen many painted storks, and now I was looking for other nesting birds. Hookem Singh knows this lake well, and he's taking us into an area where the trees are filled with many different species of birds. Sometimes the nests are so closely packed they almost touch, yet you rarely see disputes among neighbors. There's a strange sense of harmony here, and as you glide beneath the trees, it's like moving through a watery Eden. The trees are still decorated with storks, but there are also many other water birds here, and we're searching for some of the larger ones. There, nesting on a low branch ahead, a spoonbill with its chick. In its breeding plumage, the spoonbill wears a brown neckband and a feather crest on its head. Until it learns to fly, this chick, like all the nestlings here, remains totally dependent on its parents for food. That wide, flat bill is used to rake over the bottom silt in shallow water, stirring up the small fish, frogs, and insects that are this bird's main diet. The chick's bill isn't spoon-shaped yet, but it will gradually widen as the bird grows until it matches the parents. Just beyond the spoonbill's nest, a treetop crowded with white ibises. That youngster is large, and he'll soon be able to fly. His head bobbing is begging behavior. When the parent opens its beak, he reaches right into the throat for his food. Every species seems to have its own style of feeding the young. In a tree near our boat, an egret has just returned to its nest, and it looks like there's a hungry chick waiting. The egret chick bites across its parent's beak, taking food as it's squeezed out through the bill. The birds almost appear to be fighting, but this is the normal way of feeding the young. The egret's diet is mainly fish, frogs, and other aquatic life, and it carries the food back to the nest in its stomach, regurgitating the partially digested food as the chick clamps on to the bill of the parent. Both parents take part in caring for the youngsters. There's something swimming near our boat, an anhinga, or snake bird. It's easy to see how this bird got that name. It's also called a darter, and that may be a better name because that long neck can shoot out with incredible speed to spear a fish. The snakebirds, too, are in their nesting season at Bharatpur, but we've spotted some new arrivals in the open water ahead. Birds that don't come to this refuge to raise their young. Greylag Geese. They migrate from Europe and Russia, trading the cold there for the warmth and food of Bharatpur. We'll land here on this low dike, or bund. These bunds crisscross the lake and make it possible to observe much of the life here on foot. I'll leave Hookem Singh and the boat for a rendezvous with the wildlife warden of this sanctuary, Bisham Chandra. With his help, I hope to observe some of the other wildlife in this remarkable place. In a shallow marsh near the bund, a herd of domestic water buffalo have been turned out to graze. This cattle egret has been moving along with them. You often see these birds with buffalo, which stir up insects and aquatic life that the egret preys on. The buffalo move into the deeper water during the heat of the day, and quite often there are egrets, like this one, hitching a ride. Actually, when you see an egret on the back of an animal like this, it isn't because he prefers riding to flying. It's just that he's looking for an easy meal. From this bund, we have an excellent view of the surrounding lake. Not only egrets follow the buffalo, but other birds do too, like this little drongo. It doesn't seem that the buffalo takes any notice of the birds collecting on his back. Now a common mynah's joined the others. The relationship between bird and mammal is fascinating, but there's much more to see here. Bisham Chandra will take me to higher ground. We've seen much of the bird life inside the sanctuary. Now we'll search for other forms of life at the water's edge. We drove along the bund in our vehicle until we reached the higher ground surrounding the lake. This area, too, was full of animal life. This part of the preserve doesn't flood during the monsoon rains, and I should be able to walk from here. So I'll leave Bisham Chandra now and scout for wildlife along the forest edge. There's a meadow directly ahead, and moving across it, a blackbuck. These graceful antelope are always found in grassy open areas like this. You never see them in the deep woods. He seems headed toward the far end of the meadow, where another blackbuck is grazing, a much older animal. You can tell by the color. This one is brown. This one is almost black. The darker the animal, the older he is. There's another sign of youth, mock combat. These are extremely shy animals, and I'm fortunate to see this one closely. He's been distracted by two Sora's cranes working their way across the meadow as they catch insects in the tall grass. Standing a full 5 feet tall, these are the largest cranes in the world. In a treetop high over the meadow, a bee-eater has landed with its catch, a dragonfly. These birds eat a regular diet of bees and wasps, and any bird that can catch a dragonfly on the wing is a superb flyer. A white-breasted kingfisher, one of the most brilliantly colored birds in this region. This high ground is the year-round residence for many animals, like the blackbuck, who doesn't depend on the monsoon floods to create a home. But for most of the life here, Bharatpur is temporary. And when the flood recedes, birds like these storks and ibises will fly to new feeding grounds. These are young open-billed storks. They're called open-billed storks because of that gap in the bill of the adult. No one really knows why it's there. They eat snails, and the gap may help to hold their catch. Young storks don't have the gap. It develops later. Before long, the adults will leave the nests and move back into the surrounding countryside, and then these fledglings must be ready to find food for themselves. In a few short weeks, they must learn to fly. They learn in small steps. First, simply flapping their wings, strengthening the flight muscles, and feeling the power of their wings against the air. There's no instruction from the adults. They can only watch as the youngsters progress. These storks and the ibises sharing this tree are at about the same stage, just able to rise slightly above the nest. But in the nearby trees, a flock of young ibises have graduated to short practice flights. It isn't far, but like walking, flying begins with short steps. The birds are learning control, and now it's all a matter of adding distance, a little at a time. In a few more weeks, they'll fly as well as these painted storks, soaring almost effortlessly as they ride the rising thermals high above the sanctuary. Soon, all of the young birds will be perfect flyers like this. Their wings may carry them far from the refuge as the nesting season ends, but many will return again when the monsoon rains flood the forest and bring back the Birds of Bharatpur. I remained at Bharatpur for several more weeks, observing the vast numbers of birds there. Finally, as the waters began to recede, the birds started to leave, flying out into the surrounding countryside. So long as Bharatpur is preserved, the birds will return in almost unbelievable profusion when the monsoon rains flood the forest once more. Today, despite the pressures of a world crowding in around it, this sanctuary is a living tribute to the wisdom of the Indian government. Thanks to their enlightened protection, the refuge will remain a pocket of primitive beauty in our civilized world, an irreplaceable part of the wild kingdom.
Mutual of Omaha, people you can count on, has presented Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Mutual of Omaha, helping people find Medicare solutions for over 50 years. To learn more about plan options or how to protect your kingdom, contact us today.
Mutual of Omaha. Protect your kingdom.